Welcome to an AK podcast where we explore science and nutrition behind livestock care and management with the best and the brightest in the business. I'm your host, Chris Radke, part of the sales and marketing team here at Agri-King. And with me today, as usual, is a director of field services and a member of the sales management team, Mr. Mike Donaldson. Mike, how you doing, buddy?
Very well. Hard not to be good. We get a little more sunshine, a little less cold, Chris.
Oh, yes. I love spring coming in. I do like the seasons, but spring is probably my favorite when things just start coming back to life, I guess.
Yep.
Hey, Mike, who we have with us, and what are we going to be talking about, buddy?
Chris, and I'm going to say it's somewhat new, and then our guest is going to proceed to tell me how that's wrong because it's not that new. But one of the things going on right now on dairy farms is a big movement towards embracing more automation, specifically milking cows with robots, and along with some of the other things that are taking place on farms. Our guest today is Parker Snider. Parker's a member of Agri-King's technical support team, and his specialization is helping our people work with robotic dairies and overall automation. Parker, could you please give us a rundown on a little bit of your background and what you do at Agri-King specifically?
Thanks for having me on here today. My name is Parker. I have been with Agri-King for a while now, and I'm a fifth generation farmer. Here at our home farm, we're still continuing in the dairy business and crop farming, but I have chose to pursue a professional career in the dairy industry and work with Agri-King. I've been doing this robotic milking thing for some time now. It's been about 8 years, and working specifically helping farmers transition from parlors into robotic milking systems and doing data management and analysis and just trying to get the top performance out of these machines. Incredibly blessed to be able to have even robots here at our own farm. So although I do this on the professional side, I get to tinker around and play at home too and have a little fun in the backyard. But as of today, I am working here with Agri-King, and I am taking care of all of our robotic milking farms and prospects, helping navigate through setting up diets, nutritional concepts of how do we approach feeding in robots, and utilizing the data that the farms present so that we can make better educated decisions.
Wonderful. Well, I joked about how this is even now being thought of as sort of a new technology, but could you give us a little background on robotic milking, when it maybe started coming into place? I know it's largely a European idea, but you gave us your background. What's a little bit of background on the topic?
Yeah, so I'm going to look at a few notes here just about the history of robotic milking. In 1992, this whole journey began in the dairy industry. So it's hard to believe it's been around that long. We look back at the beginnings. It doesn't look like it does today. But neither does John Deere or International Harvester, right? We've evolved and we've become very equipped with the machines we have. But then shortly after that journey began, in 2000, we had roughly 800 AMS farms, which would be automated milking systems worldwide. And it's like, wow, it took a really long time to get off the ground. Well, typically, a success story does take time, right? And so, but then we also in 2000 had our first robot in Wisconsin. So we've been in the States here about 25 years now. And then in 2010, and you can see the growth here, we went up to about 10,000 AMS farms worldwide. And then 2020, the statistic that was out there is 35,000 milking farms. So you can just see the progression and how much has taken off from 2000, 2010 to 2020. And it's really more than just a fad. It's here to stay, and it's exciting time to be seeing how these systems are going to make us better. And I think as we get more and more farms on, this technology is going to continue to evolve and really be a mainstream part of what we do, whether it be robotic carousels or robotic boxes that go inside these freestall barns. It's going to evolve. It's going to look different, but it's going to be here for the long haul, especially as we see industry as a whole becoming more automated itself.
Do you see I mean, with what you do at Agri-King, we pretty well run you across the whole country. Do you see areas where there's especially big interest in the United States as they adopt this technology maybe faster than other places?
It's really in a lot of different pockets. There's been a large explosion of these dairies, especially as dealers have become more equipped to support farmers and things. But out west, it's becoming, I believe, the great opportunity. A lot of growth's going to happen. We have a lot of large farms out west, and with some of the labor laws and labor shortages that we're experiencing, I believe the West is really going to see the most growth over the next 10 years with these systems being installed.
Yeah, I mean, regardless of what, and I get to work with Parker, and he's opened my eyes to a lot of things, and I'm excited about being able to use this technology because of what it can mean for the cows and a farm's day-to-day business, and not even paying any attention to labor, but to the rank and file dairyman is issues with labor, whether it's availability, talent, cost. Does that wind up being one of the things that really gets people looking closely at robotic milking?
Well, you have all your different types of people, right? And some of them are early adopters. Some of them are, going to come on as, let's just say, the bugs have been worked out. And then you have your people that come on a little bit later. They want to know it's tried and true and it's stable. And, they want to be more confident in their decision. And so all along the way, people have just adopted at different paces. I think a large part of it can be labor driven. Some of them are wanting to add more cows without adding more labor, and that's one of the beautiful systems, being able to add that on larger farms as well, to be able to do. And, when it comes down to the finances, at one time it wasn't as appealing. People always said, "Oh, robots cost too much," but if you do a really good job of managing it yourself, they really pencil out well when it comes to it. So I think it's going to be more in the future going to be like, I think it's more financially advantageous to go towards robots than maybe what it was before. But everywhere has these changes in labor force, right? And we see this throughout all industries where everybody wants technology, everybody wants to add just automation. We can't walk down the sidewalk any longer without a phone in our hand. You know, and back in the day, it used to be a newspaper under our arm. So it's just how it's adapted and it evolved. And the biggest thing I think is this: people want to be hands-on and touching the screen, and we really can do a great job. But it still takes people who think and understand what the data is presenting, so that they can make good decisions. We used to touch, feel the cows. Milk on a three-leg stool, and now it's looking at a screen and trying to manage. So it's adjustment, but we really can do a great job with all the technologies that are woven into these systems.
One of the things that I've noticed, and even talking to our field people, is how poorly some people who have bought robots were prepared for what life with robots really entails. And I think the number one, and it probably sends shivers up your spine, but one of the number one things that I think comes up is somehow they get the impression, well, I never have to do anything with my cows again. The robots are going to take care of all of it. All I've got to do now is put feed in front of them, and if they go with a vector type system, maybe that goes away eventually. Tell me how wrong and stupid everything I just said is.
Well, some people may not even know what a vector is, but that simply sums up as an automated feed system. We have these little autonomous vehicles that push up feed and distribute fresh feed multiple times a day. We get living in this world, and so it becomes very similar to us. But for first-time listeners and people may not understand that. But the nice part about these automation and technologies that we've adopted to in the dairy industry is I can have access wherever I'm at in the world to my farm and my data, and it's my data, it's my information, but to be able to still be hands-on and be away is really nice. It gives you the flexibility of doing things that maybe you didn't do, because on the box systems that are installed in and around the barn, cows are milking themselves 24/7. and they're coming up voluntarily on their own to be milked, and a few times a day you go out and get the animals that chose not to come on their own. But it just makes it very nice and simple for farmers to be able to have that access. In these automated barns that we're seeing, we got standalone feed pushers. We, like I already said, the automatic feeding systems, TMR mixers. Um, and I said earlier, is they're even making rotaries robotic now. So cows come in, it cleans those cows and puts on the milkers, kicks them out. Yes, there still has to be some people in the parlor to make sure everything's going all right. But you're just now managing what's happening there versus maybe having to have 5 or 6 people standing around that rotary doing the manual work.
So I mentioned the automated feeding systems. You mentioned feed pushing. What would be if a farm wants to dip their toe into increased robots and automation? Is there something to be said for maybe getting a robotic feed pusher or something to start down this path, or do you see more success just plunging in with whatever you can afford?
Yeah, it's management, right? Like anything, anybody can do anything without automation. It's a level of management that is there and how much we're paying attention to details and doing things. I know some farms without the automated feeding systems and feed pushers, they're pushing up feed, 20 times a day. They're feeding the barn 6 times a day. So it's just a matter of style. A lot of farms want to do once a day feeding, and they're maybe not in that barn as much, so they may get in there 4 times a day and pushing up the feed. And so whether it's a robotic feeding system or a milking system or just a feed pusher, if you're looking at going down that road, it's worth at least talking about all of it. I don't think one way's better than another. It's really each farm's independent needs and where they're at, and maybe where they want the best quality of management, where things maybe aren't the best right now. So if your parlor's getting old, that maybe the milking robots. If your mixers are getting old and it's hard to do a great job mixing and delivering feed, then maybe it's the automated feeding system. So each farm has to make that decision and what would best benefit them. Because if you have a really new parlor and you just paid it off and you manage it well and you got good workers, why would you go and put in robots? Now that's a farm's decision to make, but you have that paid off and you can do that economically and cash flow a little better. So
Let's draw back to the idea of we call it the box, or the robot box that goes into a barn. What are the ways you look at how many boxes? Is it a number of cows? Is it an amount of milk? If I have a 230 cow farm, what am I going to need to be looking at for robots if that's how I want to milk?
yeah, so the boxes, the kind of the rule of thumb has always been 60 to 70 cows per box. And so that's kind of the decision on a farm that size. You're going to need 4 boxes. Um, and each farm, depending on milk production and what animals you have, whether it's purebred Holsteins or crossbreds or Jerseys, I know there's many other breeds out there, but each one is going to have a little bit different capacity based on the efficiencies and how much milk is given each milking to be able to perform. So it just depends. I got some farmers that choose to run 50 cows because they maintain a little more time throughout the 24-hour time period for those animals to come and get that extra milking and express themselves at peak production and things like that, that they feel like it just flows a lot better. They don't have many fetch cows, and it just things really the wheels grease really well at that point. And then I got other farmers who are like, I want the most amount of milk out of each box I can get, and we're going to try to put as many animals on a box as we can. And so, yeah, it's just management style.
There's more and more farms as milk becomes valued more for its components. Put it another way, as more milk is eaten instead of drunk, and therefore a premium is put on components, we're seeing formerly Holstein herds with a few Jerseys. We're seeing outright crossbreds, and I've been in some parlors that were built for Holsteins, and jerseys being jerseys find ways to turn sideways, and it works, but it's obviously a small cow in a big stall. Are the robots able to manage that difference in size of animal a little better than a pipe set in cement parlor system?
Yeah, they are certainly better because it's an enclosed system. In a Holstein, they do have a Holstein stall and a Jersey stall, so it does shorten up the length of that box. The width of that box doesn't really change. But one of the cool things to see in these robotic milking systems, and I'm going to specifically talk about the boxes at this point, is they cows can be cows. And so when they're coming into these systems, low stress, doing what they want, they didn't get woken up, pushed down the alley into a holding area. They stood for 45 minutes waiting to be milked. And then, they're standing in these stalls and you got people running around. It's a low stress environment. So that first milking or two, those jerseys may move around in that Holstein stall but after that, when they just milk themselves, they just come in, they stand there and they do what they want and they walk out. Like they're on vacation. They really are. So they really enjoy these systems. Humans are great if we interact with the animals well, but if we don't have the greatest interactions in the parlor, those cows are typically going to be our hardest cows. And yes, we have those animals that just, regardless of how much you love them, they are not going to
No, that
love you
makes a great
back.
deal of sense.
Yeah.
What about us maybe talk about this from an elephant in the room standpoint? What is either the return on investment like? How long does it take to pay these off with an average labor cost? Like I say, I'm excited about what they can do, but for the person who's going to write this check or go to their lender and ask for a loan, what do you see the payback on a farm, typically being on a farm that's going 2 boxes?
I don't know if I would get down to financial details about that. The thing that I would highlight here is, when we went from our old bank barns and tie stall barns to free stalls, it didn't pencil out. It wasn't going to work. You couldn't afford to do it, right? And now we see that as the standard. And that kind of happened, as well with the robots. Like it's just not going to work. But yet here we are since 1992 continuing to see all this growth and installing more of these systems. If they weren't working and sustainable, they wouldn't have stayed. Any bad equipment that was manufactured and didn't work, they went out of business, right? And so we see as this thing has evolved that they really do work. And with anything, you always have your horror stories about how it doesn't work and they're not great. But at the end of the day, each farm is going to make that decision of the investment they want to make. And our biggest thing here at Agri-King that I would say we really want to help farmers who have chose to make this investment. We want to make it give them the best possible return. And that's the biggest thing I think I have seen throughout the industry, even though we're since 1992 into this thing, but since 2000, the first robot going to Wisconsin, it's been a bumpy road at times. And farmers, the horror stories is because they couldn't get production or cows wouldn't eat feed, and there was a lot of things. But we've developed a really good standard that is going to let us, as a team, work for the farmer and help him or her to succeed in this thing, and giving them the support that they need because it can be challenging when you have this parlor mentality of how you've done things your whole life, whether you're milking on a stool or a bucket or in a parlor. You had your way of doing it, and it's kind of a big shift for people. And so we really want to be there through the thick and thin with them, helping them make the best decisions and continuing to be more on the front end versus reacting all the time to what's happening. And the data is a great tool, but if you don't analyze the data and utilize it, it will do you no different than what a parlor will. And so that's a big thing that I see is this is how we can help farmers in that quest is to look at that data, make the best decisions we can, and see how the cows respond. I mean, I kind of jokingly said, when it was all just up to bulk tank weights, right? And we had to base all of our decisions off of that. Now we have all this data, which we wished we always had. And we're still kind of just reading bulk tank weights and, and yes, we got to look at cows. They're still cows and we got to walk barns. But this data really can tell us a big story, but we just need to make sure that what we're looking at is telling us the true story, because we can look at one thing and make a decision, and then we didn't look at the whole story of, did that data support what I think I see here? And that's what we're working really hard to develop systems to be able to validate what we think we see and make decisions off of that.
That makes good sense. This is going to actually be part one of what we're looking at, is 2 parts on robotic milking. Parker, I think that's a great time to wrap up. Well, I'm going to call part one. Definitely a lot of good information. In part 2, we're going to get a little more into the some of the unique tools, some of the things that are different about how we do things on a robot. So if you don't have anything else to wrap up part 1, Parker, we'll turn it back to Chris and say, what did you learn today, guy?
Hey, I've got a follow-up question for Parker. Parker, how did you become fascinated with robots? Were you like playing with Legos one day and decided it'd be a great idea? Like, what if we put the cows through these? Or like when as a kid, like how did you become fascinated with it? Because you obviously have a
Lincoln
passion
Logs.
about it.
They didn't
Lincoln
create
Logs?
They didn't create Legos when I was born. It was Lincoln Logs. So I'm kidding. I'm not that old, but no, it's I left the farm after I got out of high school. I worked on the family farm my senior year, stayed a year home, didn't go to college, didn't make a decision where I wanted to go, what I wanted to do, trying to figure out where my place was on our farm. And so I actually went and I worked for BMW car company for 7 years, and just fixing and tinkering and doing programming and things. It was just like, I really like technology, right? I seen the BMW was really a forerunner of a lot of advanced technology that nobody else had. And it was cool to be able to be in those. And then you'd go back to your Ford Pinto and like, wow, I really want a BMW, you know? And so that kind of morphed into me moving back to my home area where I grew up. And I was like, what is out there in the dairy industry that I could get invested in? Because at that time there wasn't room for me on our family farm, and that's when this robotic milking opportunity fell into my lap. I would say it's a God thing, and the rest is history. You know, I've been at this for, like I said, 9 years now. So it was really cool to see how then in the robotic milking side, they were the forerunners in all this technology, because you wouldn't see this on a parlor system. We wouldn't invest that. Like, we put in pipelines and milkers and we get the job done. But to be a part of that early on and to see where we're at now, to where the industry has adapted, is really cool. So
That's cool. My big takeaway from this episode alone is kind of what Parker was talking about, and he kind of alluded to where his passions came from. The idea that you don't have to jump completely in, but yet Agri-King and Parker wants to come alongside of you and help you. Like maybe you need this aspect, or maybe you need another aspect, whatever that aspect is. Like to come alongside the farmer, the producer, and just to help them, create that better product. So, Parker, you got a lot of passion. I love it. So. Like Mike said, this is part 1. If you like what you heard, you like what we were talking about, you can follow us on any of our socials or at agriking.com. You can find the podcast there. If you have a question or something you'd like us to talk about further, you can email us at podcast@agriking.com. All right, Parker and Mike, I will see you on part 2. Thanks, guys.